Welcome to our special Friday Dispatch podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Isger, joined by Steve Hayes. This podcast is brought to you by The Dispatch. Visit thedispatch.com to see our full slate of newsletters and podcasts, and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. Our guest today is Erick Erickson, editor of the Resurgent and host of the Erick Erickson Show on WSB Radio. He has been both a CNN and Fox News contributor. He appears regularly on NBC's Meet the Press, Bill Maher, you name it. I'm sure you guys are well aware of Erick Erickson. And what an interesting position he is in, as someone who did not vote for the president in 2016, but has said on Twitter and elsewhere that he probably will vote for the president this time. So we're going to dig into what all that means for Erick. Let's dive right in. Erick Erickson with us today, which is pretty exciting. Erick, I think the last time that we actually chatted in person, I guess, was 2016 at the Texas Tribune Festival.
Wow, yeah, it has been a while, hasn't it?
It has been a long time. And I feel like you've been on this evolution of Erickness, we'll call it. Pre-2016, post-2016. And so I haven't really gotten to talk to you. Obviously, we follow each other on Twitter. I find you, to be fun and delightful and always thought-provoking there. But this is a treat to get to talk to you in person. So here's my opening question to you. What do you say to a conservative voter, like a policy conservative voter who was a fan of the Tea Party and really believed in what the Tea Party stood for, about who they should vote for in November?
Oh, what you're basically asking for is the conversation I have with myself in the mirror almost every day.
I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my thinking. And when I say to people who have this conversation, there is a lot from the Trump administration that we get because of Donald Trump that is not good policy. He's in 4 years going to add to the national debt what Obama added in 8. And I remember this thing called the Tea Party movement where that was bad. And now suddenly it's no big deal. Man, what sellouts. Topic for another day, maybe. But there's a lot of stuff we get from the Trump administration that I do like in public policy, whether it's because of him or in spite of him, that we wouldn't get from the Biden administration, whether it is a reassessment of the Iran deal, whether it is moving the embassy to Jerusalem, whether it is deregulation or tax cuts or judicial picks. It's not just judges. There actually have been good policy ideas from this administration. My sense is that they're all done in spite of, or without the knowledge of the president. But the people making those decisions wouldn't exist in the Biden administration, and there would actually be far worse decisions made, probably also in spite of, despite of, or without the knowledge of Joe Biden. And so that just why I would say I will vote for the president in 2020, maybe having to hold my nose and trying not to get COVID that day so I can't go to the polls. But still probably vote for the president. I've said I'll vote for him, but honestly, there are days I wake up and I'm like, why even bother? Maybe I should go play golf or just sit in the hammock and drink that day. But it's not an easy decision.
Steve?
Well, your vote really matters in Georgia potentially this time too, right? And you've got 2 down ballots.
No. Look, Georgia's not a swing state. The Democrats have said it's a swing state every year since 2014. And, interestingly enough, in every year, including 2014, the Democrats are ahead in the polls in Georgia this time. In 2014, Michelle Nunn was ahead of David Perdue, Jason Carter ahead of Nathan Deal. 2016, Hillary Clinton was ahead of Donald Trump. 2018, Stacey Abrams was ahead of Brian Kemp. This is actually the first year since 2006 where the Democrats haven't led in any polls in Georgia. And in fact, for 4 straight weeks, Joe Biden hadn't spent any money in Georgia, which suggests it's really not the swing state Stacey Abrams would have you believe it is.
At some point, though, that changes, right? I mean, maybe this isn't the year, but at some point it'll change. You're in more of a, put it this way, you're in more of a competitive state than I am in Maryland.
That's very true.
One of the bluest states in the country. So this is, this is basically your opening discussion with Sarah is one of the many reasons we wanted to have you on the podcast, because I think that what you just said there reflects the views of so many Republicans and conservatives that I've talked to across the country that we know are members of the Dispatch community that listen to these podcasts, folks that I talk to repeatedly. I did a almost a month long Midwest swing in August, and I basically had this conversation or some version of this conversation 100 times. And I think there are a lot of people who come down roughly where you come down. I'm not thrilled about it. I'm certainly I'm happy about the markets. I'm happier that Donald Trump was president than Hillary Clinton. I couldn't stand her. I worry about what Joe Biden will do, being pulled to the left pretty dramatically by the base of the Democratic Party, which is certainly shifted left in the 25 years that I've been doing this. So ultimately, I don't have much of a choice but to vote for Donald Trump. Let me ask you this question. Let's say you vote for Donald Trump. Let's say he wins re-election. He's had trouble articulating what to expect in a second Trump term. What would you expect?
I would expect in the second term continued positive impact in the judiciary. I would expect continued deregulation, particularly on the tech side of things, which is where I kind of worry about where some of the Republicans are headed, and also a lot of the Democrats are headed on the regulatory front. I'm actually in favor of more regulation in the privacy aspect there, but I think having Ajit Pai or someone like him at the FCC, that's probably one of the most important positions in government for the next 4 to 6 years is going to be the head of the FCC, given the regulatory front and the issues that are coming up there. And I think that the Trump administration would have a much slower approach towards regulation, potentially allowing newer technologies to crop up than the Biden administration would. Deregulation, I think, is also a big front with the EPA and other things. Maybe I can get a dishwasher that actually washes dishes. A minor issue that the president, I'm surprised, brings up, but it actually is one in middle America. And I do think that the issue that is not going to get addressed, that I'm really concerned about, but it's not going to get addressed by Biden either, is the debt and the deficit. That's the thing that bothers me most, having actually been in the Tea Party movement, defended the Tea Party movement, to see the wholesale sellout on that issue, that they were willing to stand up to George W. Bush on bank bailouts, TARP, and the General Motors bailout. But if the president comes along tomorrow and said he wanted to buy General Motors, half those people who are condemning George Bush would be holding up signs saying, buy it all.
So this is a big issue for me, which is it that they have sold out, so to speak, because Trump's in power and they still believe those things? Or is it now that we can say they never believed them in the first place?
I think it's a split. I think some of them never really believed it. They just didn't like Obama wielding power. But I do think some of it is that they've wholly been consumed by a cult of personality. I've never seen anything like this. There is something cultic about it, and I don't mean that disparagingly. I really don't. And I realize it sounds that
good
way.
Cult.
Yes,
good cults.
the good cults.
Right? Yeah. But I mean,
there's good cults
there really
on both sides.
The number of people on both sides now who, if Joe Biden came out tomorrow and took a position diametrically opposed to Democratic values, you'd have a lot of Democrats who embrace it. In the same way Donald Trump on the campaign trail in 2016 said nice things about Planned Parenthood, and Robert Jeffries of the First Baptist Church in Dallas came out and said, well, yeah, they do some good things.
But this is, I think that the debt and deficit, this has been a long obsession of mine as somebody who believes that we need entitlement reform and that it should probably be the number one issue that the country debates, and nobody wants to talk about it at all. You had a Republican Party that flirted with it for 5 or 6 years, pushed by Paul Ryan to embrace entitlement reform, and now has just given it up entirely. Democrats never really were serious about entitlement reform. So you have what is sure to be, it is the main driver of our debt, what is sure to accelerate the coming debt crisis. I would say that we're on the front end of that right now, and nobody in public life wants to talk about it. I guess there was a moment for me on the Tea Party question where this was all crystallized. And it was after I believe it was Trump's second State of the Union speech. And he spoke for something like 90 minutes, long,
Yes.
long speech, interrupted lots of times by enthusiastic applause from his side and sort of the folded arms, angry, furrowed brows on the Democrat side. He didn't once mention debt or deficits in the speech, didn't talk about spending, didn't talk about any of this. And yet Mark Meadows, whom I've known for a long time and have had a good relationship with, comes out after the speech and gives it an A++. And I just thought, he was at the time either the leader of the Freedom Caucus, one of the leaders of the Freedom Caucus, the kind of debt-focused, deficit-focused, spending-focused conservatives that I've long identified with, taking a president who's run against Medicare reform, run against reforming Social Security, who doesn't even mention this at a time when we're watching this accelerate pretty dramatically, and give him, a rhetorical pat on the back. And I think we've seen a lot more since then. Is there, Republicans, we can be sure that Republicans will be very interested in debt and deficits if Joe Biden is elected.
Right.
Is there any chance, if Trump wins re-election, that this becomes something Republicans care about?
Maybe because it's his second term, there'll be legacy concerns and things like that, that some Republicans will convince him for. Except the president's already, been very consistent on the fact that he doesn't think that these institutions need to be reformed. And he's always danced around others. If there's one thing he's been consistent on, it's that. So I don't think there's much hope. You'll have to have an in-run around him by Republicans if he wins re-election to try to push him on the issue. And even then, good luck.
Yeah.
So we talked about
sorry, Sarah, just to underscore that point real briefly. He had, in his first term, he had Paul Ryan, for whom this was the pet issue, like his chief cause, leading Republicans in Congress, at least for part of the time. And he had Mick Mulvaney as chief of staff. Mulvaney pushed on these things as well, and Trump didn't budge at all. Republicans are not going to take the House of Representatives, I can say with a fair amount of confidence. Mitch McConnell, even if he remains Senate Majority Leader, is not going to push the president to take on these issues. And maybe Mark Meadows would push him from inside the White House, but I'm skeptical of that for the reasons I mentioned. So I think I share your pessimism reluctantly.
I guess my question is, though, does it turn out that Trump was right and Republican electeds were wrong in terms of what the American people actually wanted? There's a reason that Trump won, and there's a reason that the American people don't mind that he doesn't think that entitlement reform should be a priority. Was Trump right all along about where the conservative movement should go, where the Republican Party is, in fact? And is he better at reading Republican voters than every single other person has been in the Republican Party for the last decade or two?
Okay, so I want to nuance this one a little bit. Is he right about where conservatives were? No. Was he right that conservatives actually are the fringe minority of the Republican Party? Yes. Turns out there are about 10 of us who actually care about these things. Most voters are Christian Democratic Party voters. They are socially conservative and populist liberal when it comes to fiscal issues. They don't care. I'm still surprised that we don't have a third party in this country that is socially conservative, fiscally liberal, although it looks like the Republican Party is rapidly becoming that. And maybe after Trump, you might make inroads with some Black and Hispanic voters as a result of it. He read the winds of the country very well, that there are a lot of people who felt like Washington, D.C. and their state capitals were leaving them behind. They didn't care about debt and deficit. It's very abstract to them with Washington, D.C. You got people who think Washington can just print money anyway, but they cared about other issues, and the president galvanized those forces together. And he's tried to co-opt the party, but I still think there are a lot of people in the Republican Party who, one, they're convinced he's not going to win again. But two, they're convinced even if he wins again, he's going to go away within 4 years and the party will go back to normal. And it's not going back to the way it was.
Yeah, I also want to get your take. So there's this Atlantic story that comes out about all these awful things that Trump said about fallen soldiers. And now there's like this very online debate, as I like to call it, about whether the story is true or not.
Right.
And John Bolton gave an account of, these exact same events, and he tells a very different story, and he doesn't like Donald Trump. I'm actually not that interested in the merits of the story. What I find so fascinating is that, for instance, you have retweeted a lot of those things and are pushing back on, I think it's fair to say, like, you don't fully buy into this Atlantic story.
Right.
And are put in a position to defend the president against, let's call it, liberal overreach or Trump derangement syndrome or whatever the kids are calling it these days. How much of his support, whether it's your support for him or overall voter support, do you think is really a pushback on cultural Democratic Party values of like, well, they're attacking our team, and so we will push back on their team, and this is just a team sport or religion or whatever else you want to call it.
It is becoming a religion.
And I'm on my team, and so they come after my guy, and that way he builds loyalty and support, because once you're out there defending someone, you do start buying into it more. Yeah, you invest.
Right. Yeah, and that's the most frustrating thing that I have right now is if I defend the president, suddenly, oh, you've sold out. And then if I criticize him, oh, you were always never Trump. It's probably the most exhausting position to be in. I take issue with Jeffrey Goldberg's story in that John Bolton, on the record in his book, does pretty dramatically contradict the opening of the story. I've got real concerns with relying heavily on all anonymous sources to build a story like that, particularly when Goldberg comes out on CNN today and says, well, they didn't want to put up with the tweets. That's why they stayed behind the scenes, essentially. But at the same time, he said this stuff about John McCain. So you can see him saying this sort of stuff. It's no secret for him to come out and deny that he called John McCain a loser. I saw the video of the president calling John McCain a loser. So where do I draw the line? I think I'm not a big fan of the way the media has gone of late in covering the president. I do think that if there's a potential negative spin they can put on it, whether it's true or not, they're rather be first than accurate. But I also do think that there's merit to some of the stories. And I find myself, people regularly now say I sound very schizophrenic on Twitter. And it's like, well, actually, there's this thing called nuance, and this can be true, and this can also be true. And,
not
and
on
let's
Twitter,
deal with
Eric.
it.
Not on Twitter.
I know. It's terrible. Just as an aside, I tell people the story all the time. There's a story in the Bible where there's the guy possessed by the legion of demons, and Jesus cast him into pigs, and they run down and drowned. What the Bible leaves out, because people in the first century wouldn't have understood, is that the demons left the pigs and then say, hey, let's invent this thing called Twitter. And that explains social media. And it infuriates me. But nonetheless, I do think there's merit to, we're at a level of tribalism we've never seen before in the country. And everybody wants to defend the president. And half of the people defending the president, if you hang out with them in a green room, are like, yeah, he really is an idiot. I really don't like him, but it's my side. And a lot of Democrats behind the scenes that I've talked to this week are like, he actually did a good thing with the Israel-UAE deal, but they're not going to give him public credit for that. And that's just the level of two-facedness right now in politics is at an all-time high, and it really bugs me on both sides.
I think that for me is one of the hardest things to communicate, or the hardest things to wrestle with over the past 4 years of covering the Trump administration and Trump. The number of not just Republicans, but senior Trump administration officials who will tell you, as you sit across the table from them, this guy's a disaster. I think he's a threat to the republic. I can't believe he's doing this, blah, blah, blah. And then literally 20 minutes later, go stand in front of a bank of microphones and sing his praises. And it's so hard to communicate that to people who aren't part of those conversations. And, you if you agree to an off the record conversation, you agree to treat it off the record. So you can't describe for people who this was, or you can't get into the details of the conversations. But this has happened dozens and dozens and dozens of times with me. I know you and I have talked about this. It's happened regularly with you. The kinds of stories setting up. So I'm probably more inclined to believe the Jeff Goldberg story because I think Jeff's a very good reporter. I also, as you pointed out, I was at the John McCain event. I was there when the president did this. I went to the press conference 2 minutes after that ended, and he and I got in something of an extended back and forth for about 10 minutes where he just flat out denied that he had said the things he denied.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
I never said this. And well, gosh, let me read you your exact words. And he'd say, no, I didn't say that. And we went back and forth and back and forth. And then the final question I asked him at the end of this long exchange was, are you familiar with the detailed accounts of what John McCain went through that made him a war hero? And Trump looked at me and said, it's irrelevant. And it was one of the very few times in covering politics where I was literally, it was sort of breathless. Like,
right.
I really can't believe he actually said that it's irrelevant what John McCain did for his country. And whether you like John McCain or agree with his policies or not, that was sort of an extraordinary moment. But it's hard to convey to people, how often you hear stories like the ones that were related in this Jeff Goldberg story, or the many. I mean, read John Bolton's book. I mean, John Bolton has 450 pages of these kinds of stories, of these kinds of details that seem almost difficult to believe, except that we've seen them unfold in public so many times. So anyway, not sure where I was going with that. Sorry, Sarah.
But no,
you can form a question out of
right.
that.
I can see the story. I can see him saying these things. That Bolton's story on the record contradicts some of this. My real frustration is the number of people who want to say this stuff off the record. And, like you and I know have had this experience where we say, these are what people are telling us. And then it becomes very much, well, unless you name names, I'm not going to believe you. I think you're making it up. And there is that level of disdain for you unless you're willing to do that. And all I can tell you is what people are telling me. I'm not going to tell you who and burn the sources. And if you say something like that about a Democrat, they're perfectly happy to believe it. It's just not with their precious.
Right. Well, and there is this massive double standard on anonymous sourcing. I mean, I think as a general rule, it's better for journalists not to use anonymous sources, period. End of discussion. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think there are reasons to use anonymous sources. I would point to Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein's work back in the 1970s to pick the iconic one. But there are other reasons that anonymous sources, using anonymous sources, can help you tease out or flush out information that should be, in my view, made public. This has happened a lot. What's crazy to me are the number of times that the people who hate anonymous sources in a story like this, which is critical of the president, love anonymous sources when they can write about something that allows them to boost the president. And there are, people, some of my colleagues at Fox, some of the people who work in conservative media, they love anonymous sources when they can write something that beats up the Democrats and boosts the president, and they hate him in stories like this.
So, Eric, what is the future of the Republican Party after, let's say, heading into 2024? Forget this election. Let's fast forward 4 years when you know that Donald Trump will not be on the ballot. Who is leading that race? Who should be leading that race? Who do you look for about the party and about the conservative movement? Those might be different.
So there are two scenarios. Does the president win re-election or not? And I think that shapes 2024. If you're in 2024 and the president is the president, you're going to see a bunch of people who, my wife hates when I use this phrase, but I think it's the most descriptively accurate phrase of it. You're going to see a bunch of people humping the president's leg in 2024. And if he loses in 2020,
honestly, I was bracing for something way worse. So that's good.
Okay. Yeah. My wife, it is very descriptive. She thinks I uses it too often, but at the same time, it accurately describes what's going on. And if the president loses, you're going to have some people still trying to be, well, it was his personality, but the policies were good. And if he wins, by the way, historically, with the exception of Reagan, voters typically don't send the same party to the White House 3 times in a row. And it puts the odds against it. If he loses, and frankly, I think the election trajectory, there are some good trend lines for the president. I think if the election were right after the convention, he would have won, but he's become so undisciplined and can't stay on message. The race is Biden's to lose. I'm not sure he's going to lose it. And you're going to have a big 2 years of wandering in the wilderness fight within the GOP of where it goes. My sense is what you will have is the donors who never really liked the guy to begin with, working very hard over the next 2 years to limit who can actually run for president in 2024, lest they have another 20-person convention, 20-person stage where the Trumpiest of the Trump people can consolidate a base of movement and run. You're going to have people working behind the scenes to stop that from happening. So you'll see a limited field of people. I don't actually think you'll have the 2,000 candidate scenario, but you'll see them trying to out-Trump each other. Now, the question is, does Donald Trump Jr. run or does Donald Trump Sr. try to run again? And I don't know that you'll see that happen. Now, that goes to the larger issue of what are the messages. I really think you're going to see everyone on stage with the Republican Party in the primary try to claim a brand of Donald Trump while making the case that there were other flaws that caused his defeat, whether it's the virus or his personality, but that there are all these issues can be wrapped into populism. I think the one who succeeds is the one who's going to do their best to reassure the establishment while also reassuring Trump voters that, I really do have the back of the little guy. Who that's going to be, my guess is all of us could sit here and name all the names of the people who are going to run for president, and the name that we don't mention will be that. I really do believe we're going to see someone in 2024 none of us are talking about right now.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson it is. All right.
There you go. Yep.
Do you think, let me push you just a little farther on that. You talked about sort of Trumpism and the staying power of Trumpism. I mean, even going so far as to suggest that will be a main part of the debate in 2024. If Donald Trump loses in 2 months, if he loses badly, don't you think that some of that appeal goes away? Why are people going to be clinging to 2016 era populism in 2024 if it's defeated soundly at the voting booths in 2020?
If it's defeated soundly, maybe not. I think it's going to be a close race. I don't think it's going to be defeated soundly. In fact, I think probably the two conventions help the Republicans keep the Senate and mitigate some of the losses they might otherwise suffer further in the House. But I do think that it'll be close. Now, let's just say if it's defeated soundly, you're still going to have a large element within the Republican Party that at least publicly says, well, it wasn't really his fault. It was the virus and the media was out to get him. And so you're still going to have to navigate that. And that, frankly, is the genius of Trumpism. What is Trumpism? If you ask 20 people what Trumpism is, you're going to get 20 answers. And that's why I think it's not really going to go away, because it's this nebulous thing that everyone can say is it, and there's going to be ties to it. Ultimately, I think the message that's going to play out is we're for the workers, not for the elites. And you're going to see people pushing very elitist policies, saying it's for the workers and that it's Trumpism. And we're all going to have a field day laughing at those people, but they're going to say it with a straight face.
What can Trump do to lose your vote between now and November? And what could Biden do to win your vote between now and November?
Okay. Here's my problem. I actually like Joe Biden and I like Jill Biden. They're tremendously nice people, and that gets me in trouble because, but he supports this, that, or the other. He can't be a nice person. I'm not saying good and moral good or moral bad. He's a nice person, and his wife is a tremendously nice person. I can't vote for him because I'm a very pro-life voter, and his policies would go against that in a very big way, and that bothers me. But I could stay home. And I'm probably not going to stay home. Maybe I'll stay home. It depends on what hour of the day you ask me what the president's tweeted. The president could very much lose my vote between now and November if he picks up the North Korean torch again and tries to just have another disastrous foreign policy there. Or frankly, in all honesty, this is where the president can lose me and where he may. If the president rushes out in October, November, completely undermining American policy when it comes to fighting the virus, claiming that there's a cure when there is no cure in a desperate bid to win re-election. We've got enough mendacity in our election right now to champion a cure where there is none for people who could use it, particularly my wife who has lung cancer and really can't leave the house right now. That would bother me greatly. And I'm afraid we may be headed down that path with some of the stuff I'm reading. I really hope not. I don't think it's fair to say the president has bungled the viral response when it's mostly a state thing. I do think it's fair to say the president has bungled the job of commander in chief and the bully pulpit when he could have convinced people to put on masks and keep their distance and do the things that presidents can do just through moral leadership. He's totally failed in that aspect of it. At the same time, I do think it's more of a state level response, but I can see this administration, particularly some of the people around the president in politics, trying to sell snake oil as a cure for the virus just to claim that we should vote for him because he came up with it.
Wouldn't it be fun if it were actual snake oil, though?
Oh, that actually would be. It wouldn't surprise me. Turpentine or something. I'm appalled by all sides when it comes to the handling of the virus. This is not a Republican or Democrat thing. Everybody has turned this into politics when there are hundreds of thousands of people who are dying because of this thing. You got half the people who are convinced a conspiracy to get the president, and the other half are convinced the president's engaged in a conspiracy to get himself reelected with it. It just is disgusting.
What do you say to Republican voters, not the Lincoln Project folks who are sort of burn it all down? We support Joe Biden. Even when he becomes president, we support his policies. But the Republican voters against Trump folks who I think have a more nuanced take on it, which is, yeah, we understand he's doing some good things and judges and all the things that you've pointed to. But if you want to have the Republican Party back, and if you want to have the conservative movement mean anything, you have to defeat him this time so you can get the party back. Not a burn it all down strategy here, but we want to conserve the conservative party,
right,
as it were. What do you say to the RVATs?
I honestly can't take issue with their logic as much as I would like to. I disagree in that I'll go vote. And the way I tell people is, in 2016, I voted third party. I voted for Evan McMullen. I've regretted it ever since. I could stay home. It's not my inclination to ever stay home in an election. So between the Republicans and the Democrats, I'll vote for the Republicans. But I don't blame people who say I got to stay home, because I still think character counts, and he's got terrible character. I just typically don't sit out elections. But I really can't blame people who say that if we continue down this path with the Republican Party, we're going to have a problem. Yeah, I too think we're going to have a problem. It's no easy position for anyone. All I can say is I'm a big advocate of grace these days, more so than I ever have been in my life, that two people have to disagree. I fundamentally disagree with the Lincoln Project folks, who I think have largely left the Republican Party. Some of them were mercenaries within the Republican Party and don't want to be held accountable for actually contributing to the rise of cynicism that led to the rise of the president. But for those who look at the party and say, maybe we just need to sit it out and rebuild in 4 years, I'm sympathetic to it.
What do you, I mean, you're sort of on the front lines of the information space, doing a successful talk radio show 3 hours a day and then more. You've got your own Substack newsletter, the same platform that we use to publish the Dispatch, which is very good newsletter. I told Eric I read it almost every day, and he can see, because he can go in and tell whether I'm reading it every day. But it's very good. It's always, I find it always thought-provoking, what have you. One of the concerns you just mentioned, conspiracy theories. One of the concerns I have, is sort of a big picture concern of mine, is that with people living in these information silos and so little information traveling outside of those silos, these conspiracy theories take on a life of their own almost immediately, in a really scary way. And they're no longer limited to, the people that 30 years ago we would have thought of as crackpots, the tinfoil hat crowd, the black helicopter crowd. Oh gosh, these people are crazy, and there aren't very many of them. Now you have movements like the QAnon movement, which I think in some mainstream reporting has been overstated. And in some ways, maybe it hasn't been overstated. In some ways, maybe it's bigger than even the reporting has suggested at this point. But you have these movements that can grow so quickly. Are you optimistic about the eagerness of the American people, your typical Republican voter, to want to find out what's true? Or are we just now in a moment where everybody's just looking for affirmation of their own thoughts, and that makes them more susceptible to these kinds of conspiracy theories?
Well, you're hitting on I guess one of my hot button issues of the day. I think people aren't necessarily out to get affirmation. I think largely QAnon and some of these other conspiracies exist in large part because as people go online and they see reporters from news networks with blue check marks on Twitter exposing themselves as the liberals they always thought they were, it makes them convinced that, the people who said there was always a left-wing conspiracy in the media, turns out they were always right. So I'm going to go listen to those people more now and not actually listen to the CNNs or the NBCs, ABC, CBSs of the world. I think the media has done more to cause the explosion of these conspiracy theories than not. And the thing that I actually find most bothersome is that it's not just a phenomenon of the right, but of the left as well. And the media itself, because it's of the left, is more prone to treat the left-wing conspiracies legitimate in ways they never would the right. For example, I do think there was Russian interference in 2016. And if you read the actual reports, which I have, it was sowing discord in this country. If you listen to your average cable prognosticator, it sounds like they think some Russian actually went into a ballot box in Wisconsin and stuffed the ballots, which they didn't do. Or take, for example, the great conspiracy theory of the post office, which was actually implementing a report from the Obama administration and try to save some efficiencies. Was there some nebulousness there? Yes, there was. There is always partisanship. But if you read the media reports on or listened to CNN, it very much sounded like the post office was in on sabotaging the election, which in fact, they're going to handle 5 times as much mail 3 weeks before Christmas and are able to get it delivered than they will ballots in the country. But the left said this was a conspiracy, and so it was immediately seized upon. So I don't think there's a level of self-reflection in the media that there needs to be for us to get past the conspiracy age. And I think there's been a reinforcement within the media of a lot of left-wing talking points. And as much as there are problems with the presidency, I think they've been amplified by the media beyond reason. And all of this plays to more and more people tuning out of media and tuning into their friends on Facebook and not being able to distinguish truth from fiction. And you do have politicians who play that up. We just had Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia, who's just, bat poop crazy, get the Republican nomination up in Northwest Georgia, who believes that the Jews are in charge behind the scenes and 9/11 was something other than what it was. And she's big into QAnon. People like that can't exist if the media is willing to be a little more honest than they are. I hate to sound like a broken record on this point, but I really do think that the media has a lot to do with people's distrust of the media, and they're not willing to admit it.
Eric, I want to get to something in a pre-2016 Eric world. I did not like your commentary. I didn't like the way you said things. I didn't like a lot of what you talked about, especially about women. And you've had this transformation where I think, and you've said, like, you regret some of the things you said, and you've talked a lot about grace. And I'm curious, as someone who wants to have a dialogue with people who I don't agree with and I don't like the way they say things, what caused that? And how could I, for instance, use that to convince other people to have a similar transformation?
Mine was very personal. I nearly died. 2016 was actually a very painful year in our household. And I've talked about this before. We had 3 people show up on our front porch to threaten us. I'm sitting 6 feet from my front door, and they stood there and threatened us because I said I wouldn't support the president because I actually thought character counted. Part of it was this ongoing being in seminary and realizing in seminary just how much I was moving my faith towards politics instead of the other way and having to correct that. But then as all this Trump stuff was building in 2015, not inviting him to the Red State Gathering and then him mean tweeting me and deciding I was going to leave Red State and go do something else. I was trying to get back in shape, having a very hard time, thought I was allergies, thought I was just out of shape. And by March, I couldn't walk up half a flight of stairs without having to sit down and catch my breath. My wife made me go to the hospital. They gave me a CT scan and wouldn't let me get up. They strapped me to the table. They rushed me into a cardiac ICU unit, and I was there for 2 weeks. I will never forget, as they're trying to put an IV in me, the doctor in the ICU sees my scan up on the board and calls into the room to see if they had taken that body to the morgue yet. And he was talking about me. And there for 2 weeks without the internet, contemplating these people who are showing up at our house, my kids being bullied in school because I won't support the president. And by God, you've said that this is the most important election in our lifetime. And the very same day I'm being put in the ICU, the Mayo Clinic calls my wife and tells her she's got an incurable form of lung cancer. It was kind of a wake-up call that, there's more important things in life than politics. And some of the rhetoric that I myself had been using over years had amped people up to a level that wasn't healthy. And I was seeing it firsthand with people on my doorstep. And it just caused a complete life recalibration. And then to be a conservative talk radio person on the largest talk radio station in the country, and have people now trying to get my job, where if I lost my job, my wife would lose her insurance and would undoubtedly die, given the lack of cure for her cancer. It was all of that was a confluence at once that I probably needed to go through in life to realize that, there's more importance in life than politics. And here I am now realizing that a lot of people who listen to me and read me have turned their politics into a religion like I had done, and needed to recalibrate that. And, there were a lot of people who were trying to get my job. It was kind of funny after the election in 2016. I was actually, so my radio station has Sean Hannity on before me. They were going to move me into the 3 to 6 slot and move Hannity later in the day. And after the election, they're like, well, we can't do that. The guy blew the election, got it wrong. We need to keep him where he is. And a lot of people thought I was going to be out of a job. But ironically, my ratings actually went up over time as I realized, I need to start connecting to people in a different way. And I need to not be the partisan rabble rouser, but actually commit to seeing, here's the news story, here's what's happening, here's my analysis of it. Now I'll tell you what I think as a conservative, but let's actually deal in facts. Had I not nearly died, and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and my wife had to fly to the Mayo Clinic in Arizona without me to get her lung biopsy to confirm she does have what she has. I probably would still be where I was, standing up to the president or not, which had come before that. But it was definitely eye-opening, realizing how many other people besides myself really have turned their politics into their religion. Instead of, they say they're Christians, and yet they're looking for Donald Trump to part the water, walk across the water and save the world. And he's not going to save anything. He's what you call a sinner.
It has provided me a lot of hope, separate from any disagreements we may have over policy or politics or anything else, that post all of this, you still have such a vibrant voice and audience, and that you don't have to be caustic and turn politics into a religion to succeed at what you're doing. And so that's a very good thing to me. It makes me very happy.
Well, some people may listen to this and get mad at me for saying it, but I get accused of selling out now for supporting the president, though I stuck to my guns in 2016 and didn't support him in conservative talk radio, where I know a lot of people who lost their jobs in conservative talk radio for doing what I did. And I fairly or not, I perceive many of them as having become embittered in an unhealthy way towards their audience. Those people cost me my job. I live in Atlanta. I'm on the largest conservative talk station in the country. And I not only didn't support the president, but would regularly, including now, assail the president. And it turns out there actually are a lot of people out there who like a guy who is a conservative, who is a Christian, but is willing to call BS on his own side. And I don't think you can blame the audience for your success or failure. It's on you whether or not you can agree to disagree with your audience. In fact, the guy who gave me this advice is named Rush Limbaugh, who said, who cares, just to have a good relationship with your audience, regardless of the substance of what you're saying, and they'll still listen to you even if they disagree. And that's a lesson for a lot of people in politics right now.
All right, Steve, should we go to our fun topic?
Let's do it.
So, Eric, I was telling you in the green room, I have a little baby boy who's turning 3 months next week. And a lot of being a new parent for me in those middle of the night moments is, he's so upset about something and about how hard it is to be a baby. And you can just see his frustration. And it has made me think man, being an adult is pretty awesome. And as much as we make fun of babies and how easy they have it, it kind of sucks not to be able to use your hands and be able to communicate what you need and what's wrong. So my question to you is, what is that like? It's awesome to be an adult luxury that you now will never go without.
Oh, yeah, there are a lot of things I could answer. The obvious one is income stream. Now that I'm grown up and can do the things in my 20s that I wanted to do. But honestly, at this point, I'll tell you, I have a Yukon Denali. And I can sit in that sucker, and I have surround sound and Apple CarPlay and heated and air-conditioned seats, and it drives smooth. And my kid can stand right outside the window, and I don't hear him. And it's like in Get Smart, they drop the bubble down on you, and you can't.
Yes,
that is I can go sit in my car, turn on the air-conditioned seats, and sit in the driveway and not hear my kids, my wife, the neighbors, anything. I don't want to ever give up that car again.
I call that a luxury pod. And I think luxury podding is an undervalued adult experience. Like showing up 10 minutes early to a meeting and getting to sit in your car with your own, like just thoughts and quiet. I love showing up early, or I used to when we used to have in-person meetings, but I used to love showing up 10 minutes early and just having that time in my car.
I mean, so I work from home and I do 5 hours. I do 3 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. And I've got 4 hours between to do stuff. And I can go sit in my car and be productive. It even has Wi-Fi. Who knew? I had this car for a year before I even knew it had Wi-Fi. And I can sit in there. I can actually come up with excuses to say, you know what? Like yesterday, I think I need to go to Atlanta. I'm pretty sure I've got something happening in Atlanta, and just go and be by myself. Oh, it's wonderful. And, you know, I have completely different music tastes from the rest of my family. I have the music taste of like an 18-year-old guy in college. And so I can listen to all the terrible music my wife and kids hate, and they don't have to hear the cuss words, and I don't have to hear them.
Steve, what's yours? I'm very curious about this.
Yeah, I mean, so the obvious sort of playing to type answer would be, I can go out anytime and get a really nice bottle of Spanish wine, right?
Too much to type. No, I reject that as the answer.
Too much to type. There's the deeper philosophical answer in that you have this discovery that you can live your life intentionally, and that you're the one who determines what your path is going to look like. But that would take too much further explanation and probably bring us down. So I'm going to actually give an answer that's a little bit like the answer that Eric gave. A couple of years ago, I've been a mountain biker for 25 years, which is probably not easy for people to believe who have actually seen me in person, because a little bigger than the average mountain biker, if you will. But I've also had terrible knee problems. I've had 6 knee surgeries on my right knee, 1 knee surgery on my left knee. And I didn't want to buy a mountain bike that could potentially contribute to my knee problems, to my physical problems. So I saved up a bunch of money and I went out and got the greatest mountain bike. It's so nice. It's like, I mean, I don't even know. It has, built-in shocks. It's smooth. There's no way that if I am injured again mountain biking, that it will be the bike's fault. It'll be only my fault. And I love to spend time on it, and it costs too much money. But I was able to make that decision.
I invested in a mountain bike last year, and then I realized, the Georgia heat sucks, and I hate snakes. So I only ride it in the wintertime.
That's
all right,
good.
you two can go mountain biking sometime. I'm kind of looking forward to this. My answer is based on my husband last night. Out of nowhere, we're quietly like doing our own thing, and he turns over to me and he says, "I love that we have a king bed." I thought to myself, "Oh my God, yes, that is my like adult luxury. I will never go back to not having a king bed. The number of things that I will give up in my life, going to restaurants, great wine, anything, like I will give it all up before I give up that king bed."
I totally see that one. When we got married, I had to have a king bed. We would have been divorced within a week of marriage if we didn't. In fact, we just got a new mattress last week for our bed, and adulting, having the income to buy that mattress. Yeah.
Yes. Mattresses are, I mean, they're like cars. You can really, there's like a whole range.
Nuts. I had to go, we had a mattress for you could literally see the divots from where we sleep. It was like, it's time for a new mattress. Do you get a foam mattress, a hybrid mattress, a spring mattress? It's insane now.
Do you know what I did? I know, Steve, go ahead.
Do you know, Sarah, that there is such a thing as a California king?
I do, but California kings are actually narrower.
Yes.
They're longer.
People too close together in the bed.
I thought they were the same dimensions in terms of width, but just longer.
No, they're a little bit narrower, like maybe 4 inches narrower and then 4 inches longer or something. But I'm kind of an over researcher when it comes to any purchase, any major purchase, but even minor purchases. I will spend so much time researching. And so when it came to a mattress, I did tons of online research, so many reviews and the Caspers and everything else. And then I also went around to every luxury hotel in DC and asked to try their mattress. And I made my best friend come with me, and the two of us walking into hotels and be like, "Hi, we'd like to try your mattress."
That's fantastic. I should have done that. I went with one of those hybrid ones that has the spring coils and the foam and like the purple stuff that's on top. And, you know, I mean, let's be honest. Your listeners can't see this. Y'all can, but your listeners can't. I'm fat. I sink in a mattress. I don't want to sink in a mattress. I want a firm mattress that I can just glide across. And man, I got a good one. But I felt so bad for the guys who delivered it the other day. I didn't realize it was 300 pounds. And it was 2 guys had to carry it up the stairs, and I wound up having to help them. They were so exhausted, I had to tip them each $50. I felt so guilty.
Well, and like mattresses are so awkward. It's not like if a 300-pound wooden thing is actually much easier than a 300-pound mattress.
And now every time I lay down, I think, is my bed going to fall through the floor now?
All right. Well, thank you, listeners, for joining us for this special Friday Dispatch. And thank you, Eric, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.